hCG chica. This is just a quick video and or podcast. Maybe you're just listening, but if you just want to be reminded of the basic phase 2 food list from the original Dr. Simeon's diet. So I'm just going to go over that only in case that's all you're wondering about. So for the proteins that were allowed were lean beef, super lean beef. You basically, with all the proteins, ideally they would have no fat at all. But of course, we know with some of these, like the beef, there may be a small amount of fat, but you can't be getting like 90%, fat-free. That's not fat-free enough. Okay, so it needs to be like 95% or more fat-free, okay? So the lean beef, chicken breast, veal, fresh white fish. Examples of that would be like catfish, trout, I forgot the other ones right now, but fresh white fish, lobster, crab, or shrimp, okay? So pretty short list. With the vegetables, the choices are spinach, chard, chicory, beet greens, not beets, beet greens, green salad, so the different types of lettuces are okay, they would fit into that category. Tomatoes, celery, fennel, onions, radishes, cucumbers, asparagus, and cabbage. And there's different types of cabbage, and so those would be fine. So those are the vegetables. The fruits, again, are apple, orange, small handful of strawberries, or half a grapefruit. And lastly, there's like the carb, starchy portion that not too many hCGers actually end up eating on the diet, but it is allowed, which is 1 grissini or 1 Melba toast. And this is per meal. Now the grissini, make sure that it doesn't have any olive oil in it, because today a lot of the grissini sticks you'll find actually do have olive oil in them, so that's not something you would want. Now as far as additional like etc. type stuff, you're allowed the juice of 1 lemon daily. You can use spices, you can use salt, you can use all the different herbs and spices. Just always check ingredient labels, especially on things like spice mixes, because with spice mixes, they often add stuff like maltodextrin or MSG. Now, because people are aware of MSG and they're trying to avoid it, they've come up with 20 other names for MSG that's not actually MSG to basically try to trick us. So just be very cautious with spice mixes. If it tastes too good, it probably has MSG in it. So it's probably safer to stick with just individual spices like straight cumin, straight coriander, stuff like that. But those things are okay. And then it said any quantity of water, tea, or coffee. And originally, of course, the sugar-free sweeteners were allowed in moderation in the original protocol. The sweeteners used back then are different than the ones most people use today. But stevia used in moderation is what most people use on the protocol now. And in very small amounts, erythritol may be okay, but you do need to be cautious, because like with erythritol being a sugar alcohol, if you had too much, I do think it could actually affect your results. But if it's a very minute amount, probably, that would be all right. So that's the foods that are allowed. Now, if you're wanting to have something to track this more easily, I actually have an hCG diet tracker, and if it's January 2015 or later, it's probably already out on Amazon. Right now, it's when I'm recording this, it's November, and so I'm still in the making it phase. It's in this binder here. But what I actually have is I'm gonna have these pages with little check mark boxes where you can, check off whatever you ate for your lunch and your dinner. I even have a slot for breakfast for those who could, because you are allowed to spread your foods out, right? And then I also have a section for macro breakdown for, for instance, the various different lean cuts of beef. I actually have the grams and ounces serving size, how many calories, how many grams of protein, and how many grams of fat. Let me just show you. It's kind of far away. I know probably can't really see what it looks like, but anyway, that's going to be in the tracker as well, and that way you guys can have an idea. Because when you say lean beef, it's like, well, what is that? There's so many different cuts of beef. Which ones would fit into the right category? Because, you know, ground beef is the only one that's going to tell you the percentage of fat, you know, whereas some of the other ones don't. But there's things like London broil, top sirloin steak. So I researched all of that to know what the very leanest cuts of beef were, and I've included those stats in the tracker. So you can check for the diet tracker on Amazon.com. I don't know the title of it yet. It's going to be, I have no idea actually. So just search probably Razel lamb or hCG chica, and hopefully it'll come up if you search that on Amazon. In the future, when it's out, I will put that into this video. So I hope that that helps. And as far as condiments go, you know, things like vinegar, mustard, those things are okay. Basically, any little miscellaneous things that you're using, the main thing that you want to make sure of is that it doesn't contain extra weird starches, that it doesn't contain any oil or fat. So just check your ingredient labels, because for instance, a plain regular mustard is going to be fine. However, there's, you know, everyone's trying to make mustard special these days. So some mustards, it might be a honey mustard or some other flavored mustard. And then when you look on the back and you look at the ingredients, it's going to have like sugar in it or some type of starch or sugar. So that's something that you would not want to use on hCG. So just always check whatever you're using. Honestly, even vinegar. There's a pomegranate vinegar that I really like, but I didn't realize there's a bunch of sugar in it. So they add sugar to this pomegranate vinegar to make it taste sweeter. And so that would not be suitable for the hCG diet. So make sure that you check labels on everything that you do. And, you know, just a reminder again, I was just gonna make this about the foods, but I don't know, since I'm here, I might as well just mention it. How you apportion out the foods again is original protocol, of course, breakfast, coffee or tea, and then for lunch, it's 1 protein that's 100 grams off of the food list we mentioned, 1 vegetable, 1 fruit, and 1 grissini or Melba toast. And then you get the same thing again for dinner. 1 protein, 1 vegetable, 1 fruit, 1 grissini in the serving sizes mentioned. So you can spread your food out, that is allowed, but you can't combine food. So you can't take your lunch fruit and your dinner fruit and put them together. So that's not allowed. It ends up being too many carbs in one sitting. The only food, as you'll notice, that was kind of actually measured was the protein, the 100 grams, and that actually equals out to, I think, about a little over 3.5 ounces of protein. So that's actually, if you want to do this protocol, you can get more anal about it and like measure other stuff, but honestly, you really don't have to. And I feel that the whole point of this protocol is to kind of get over the obsession with food. You know, if you spend all your time weighing and measuring every little ounce of lettuce, it's going to kind of fuel the obsession instead of taking your mind away from it. So it's just something to keep in mind. Dr. Simeon's basically said that the idea was not to exceed 500 calories. So you don't have to make sure that you are eating 500 calories every day. It's just that you weren't supposed to exceed that. So some days you may only eat 350 calories. Some days it may be 475. It doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about that. Just weigh your protein. The fruits, it was just, you know, 1 apple, 1 orange, half a grapefruit, or a handful of strawberries. And then with the vegetables, they weren't to be weighed. You basically eat those to hunger. He did suggest, or he didn't suggest, he did say not to mix your vegetables. And I have a whole video talking about whether or not you can mix vegetables on hCG and what to keep in mind if you decide to. So I will link to that in this article if you want to check out my feedback on that. But essentially, in a nutshell, if you do mix vegetables, you do need to be more conscious about how much you're eating. Because basically, once you start combining vegetables, things become tastier and you start eating larger quantities. That's kind of my take on that. So in that case, you may want to measure or be more aware of the calories, or just, you know, use hunger as your guide and be honest with yourself. You know, if you're getting totally stuffed off of this, you know, medley of vegetables that you roasted, you know, that may not be a good thing for hCG. So just to keep that in mind. Now, there were a couple alternatives to the meat protein serving that Dr. Simeon said that you could have on occasion. And those were, on occasion, in place of 1 meat protein, you could have 1 egg plus 3 egg whites. So 1 egg plus 3 egg whites. or 100 grams of fat-free cottage cheese. Okay, so what happens is sometimes you just get so sick of chicken breast and you don't like fish, and so, you know, he's like, on occasion you can do this, okay? Now the question comes up, what about, you know, that was back in the 50s, right? Here we are, 2015. There are people who've made adjustments to the protocol, right? As far as foods go and things like that. So I'm gonna talk about that in more detail in another video, and I will link to that. It's probably gonna be called Variations That I've Done on the hCG Diet, something to that effect, and it will be linked to in the article that goes with this video. So I wanna try to keep things somewhat separate. But what I will say is, in general, a lot of people these days are including, outside of the proteins that were mentioned in the original protocol, tuna, water-packed, obviously, tuna, and 99% fat-free turkey is frequently being used. I have used both of them. I will say with the tuna, just be careful, because I really am one of those people that's cautious about the whole mercury content of tuna thing. And, you know, taking in heavy metals while you're on hCG is not something you probably want to do. And I do think it is a real concern. So if you have it, I probably wouldn't suggest having it all the time. But that's something that some are doing with success. When it comes to the fruits, some are having things like other berries, like blueberries or raspberries, in addition, and including that as part of the protocol, and they feel like they're having success with that. And then there are some various other vegetables that I did use my final round of hCG, and I'm not going to mention them in this video. Like I said, look for my post on variations that I've done on the hCG diet to get all the details on that. However, you really can't go wrong if you stick with the original protocol. That's the nice thing about it. There's a nice thing and there's a bad thing about it. The nice thing about it is that if you go with it, you can't go wrong. You're gonna do well. You're gonna know that you're kind of getting the best results that you can, right? The downside is that it's very, very strict. The food list is extremely tiny, and you can get bored, and it could just get really tough. You know, some people would say, well, tough beans, get over it. And, you know, to some extent, you do want to remind yourself that this is only 3 to 6 weeks, you know, and that this is for a longer term result that you're trying to get. You're going to be able to have more variety again in just a few weeks. However, I have some compassion and sympathy for you guys because I've done the diet, and it was a really tough mental adjustment for me because I was addicted to sugar before I started the diet. And so it made it really tough. And so sometimes you do get desperate, you know, and you can't think like, oh, this is just for a few weeks. It's just not that easy. You know, so sometimes you may choose to do something a little bit different, because sometimes you get to that point where it's like you either try something a little different or you just completely stop the diet or just totally go off the deep end, you know. And in that case, which is the better choice, you know? So that's kind of how I look at it. The other thing when it comes to the protein is that a lot of people are using on occasion as well a protein replacement powder. You know, most of the ones on the market these days are like carb free, and they're sweetened with like stevia. And so in that case, most of those would be suitable. Let's see, is there anything else here? I guess that's it. That's it. Okay, you guys. Just peruse around. If you're on hcgchica.com right now, you know that I have tons of info on every subject pretty much for this protocol. What I'm trying to do is I have some videos that are really long that kind of cover quite a bit of one topic, and now what I'm trying to do is create shorter videos that cover a shorter portion of it, and I don't know that I'm doing a very good job of that because this was supposed to be one of those 3-minute videos, and I have a feeling that it's probably more like 9 or 10 minutes. But anyway, I'm doing the best I can, you guys. All right, you guys, take care. Bye.